Aye.
Short Bus Debate Club. It's a bus rolling.
I can get on board. Hello, I'm Darren Jolly.
It's time to get this short bus started. So let's roll and on with the show. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of the U.F.O movie thingamajig. This is Brian Courtney. Darren Jolly is right across the table.
Hello.
And so at the end of the last segment, you said you wanted to talk about time and the positive effects of aliens?
Well, I guess the spaces where they clearly draw out this tension between military aspects of dealing with UFOs, UAPs, whatever, and maintaining an altruistic relationship to them. And the strongest example that I can think of right off the top of my head is obviously the Star Trek stuff, because depending on who you're talking to with regards to how they interact with alien races. So there's the concept of exploration, right? And then there's the concept of sort of like an imperial position, like taking over new territory. So Klingons would have looked at the Starfleet as more, at least until maybe after the Undiscovered Country, they'd look at the Starfleet as a military organization. The Romulans definitely looked at Starfleet as a military organization. The Cardassians clearly looked at Starfleet as a military organization. But the way that Starfleet saw themselves, so say for instance, there's this one episode where, and this is on The Next Generation, where Riker is down. One thing that you had said last episode is if you were going to go and if you were militarily going to confront a different alien species, you would go and you would do recon. So this is something that inside of Star Trek they did often. There in this one episode, Riker had all these prosthetic things put on him, make it look like he had 3 fingers, make it look like these weird things on his head to make it look like he was a person from the planet that he was going to. And he ends up getting in some sort of an altercation. He's in the hospital, and all of these medical professionals in the hospital are like, his heart's in the wrong place, his lungs are in the wrong place, and they end up realizing, they're like, well, he's not from here. And the problem is, so they were going to this planet because they were on the cusp of having a warp drive, right? So the time period when aliens from the Federation would go and introduce themselves to new species, new planet, new people on another planet, it would always be when they had developed warp speed. And this planet, they were right next to it, but they were very xenophobic. So through a number of things, through Riker getting caught, they Picard and Troy go down to the planet and introduce themselves to the leader and to their main science person, this science lady who was the head of the group, the part of the government that was developing the warp speed capabilities. The way that it went down, they're like, how do we not know you're not somebody who's trying to colonize us? How do we not know that you're... And they basically told them, we don't want you here now, you're going to have to go. Because the response to Riker was a demonstration that there was this hyper-xenophobic disposition, and anybody that wasn't, they still thought that they were the center of the universe, much like we do right now, right? So they remove themselves from the planet and say, we hope we can see you in the future when you get to the point, where you're actually getting off the planet and going to other places. But It's all that stuff rooted in the Prime Directive, right? There's another episode where they're going and they're just basically doing anthropological studies. Like they're looking at this proto-Vulcan group. They're not Vulcans from Vulcan. They're like biologically like siblings to Vulcans. And something happens. They have a duck. What do you call it? A duck bill or something like that.
Blind?
A duck blind. That's what I was. Yes, you got it. Good. So they've been watching them for all this time, and then there's this their generator that's keeping the hologram up, that's keeping them invisible to the species. It malfunctions, and like the Enterprise is trying to go get there before anybody sees them, but they fail. And this one guy, I cannot remember his name in real life, but he was Leland Palmer in Twin Peaks. He ends up seeing him, and then he freaks out and he falls off this rock and he almost dies. So Crusher takes him up to the ship and saves his life. And they try to erase his memories, but while he's getting his life saved, he can see Picard as the leader of all these people. So when he gets back down to their planet, and his memory hasn't been erased sufficiently, there's this quote from Arthur C. Clarke: "Any sufficient advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." Right. So like if you just have bows and arrows, right, and that's how you get your food, and then you see these people that can transport you up to they can bring you back to life when you're almost dead. That seems like magic. So there's this instance where at the resolution of it, they keep referring to God as the Picard, right? The Picard, blah, 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 blah. He's telling, Leto is the name of the character, I'm not a god. I can die just like you die. And he shoots him with an arrow and, he ends up on his ass. But there's this space in it where they're like, well, why can't you give us all this technology? And they're like, well, because if I gave it to you right now, you wouldn't develop in your own way. So that's the same thing with that other group, where Riker had unintentionally got caught with his pants down while he was on the planet and got injured. So in the space of Star Trek, you have this tension where you have science exploration, which is essentially what's happening in both of those instances, where they're trying to see how close civilization is to getting to a point where progress sort of happens over and over and over again. The whole point is to continue to grow, to continue to develop. It's not about fighting each other anymore. It's not about fighting amongst yourselves. It's about bettering yourself as a society collectively. But then you have that counterpoint, and these other civilizations are very developed, no doubt. The Klingons were very developed, the Romulans, the Cardassians, but their whole sort of social disposition was still bound to this sort of military concept. So there's the tension in Star Trek constantly, where the idea is that Star Trek is not a military body, but when you look at all the Star Treks with Chris Pine and that time period, it's hard to deny that while they saw themselves as altruistic, that there were these tendencies inside of them that were still very militaristic, and they hadn't quite gotten away from that headspace, that social space, where these sort of like imperial tendencies are still there. They're not entirely gone. You're still afraid of something that's not totally connected to you, so you react militarily under certain circumstances, and it drives that tension forward. But you at least have both things happening at the same time. You want to think, a lot of people when they talk about Star Trek, they want to think of it in these pure terms where it's like just about society continuing to revolutionize itself over and over and over again, and everybody sort of functioning on behalf of that society, but that's never entirely true. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I was sitting there thinking while you were talking, and I mean, obviously, if you look at the United States right now, there are lots of countries around the world that think of us as a military institution.
And for very goddamn good reason.
But maybe, on some level, not all of them, because I just don't believe that they think they're doing it for the right reasons. But there are probably some people that think we're doing it like, you know, they always made the argument that we went into Afghanistan. We weren't just after bin Laden, but we wanted to free those women, the oppressed women of Afghanistan. And yeah, I'm down with that. That's great. I think it's a good idea. I just don't buy it. I don't think that that's why you were doing it. I think you were doing it because there were huge deposits of rare earth elements. I think you were doing it because it made for a nice base to establish some balance within the region. You know, these are the reasons I think you're doing it, which I think is why people think of us as driven militarily.
It's really a wolf in sheep's, like democracy is the sheep's clothing.
Yeah,
and
we don't give a shit about those people. I mean, there are still women in Africa where they're sewing their fucking vagina shut because they don't want them to have sex.
Well, they're cutting off the clits.
They do that too.
I never heard about anybody sewing pussy shut.
Well, the clit thing was for pleasure. We're taking away your pleasure. Anyway.
Either way, yeah.
They're fucking completely fucking these girls up, but we're not invading that country because we want to free those women.
Yeah, because they don't have rare earth minerals and they don't,
right,
or oil or diamonds and gold or whatever.
So I just don't buy it. But I would like to think that maybe we could get there at some point where it is truly not altruistic, because I don't know that anybody can be altruistic. I think we can make attempts. But just to do things for the right reasons, whatever those
why can't people be altruistic?
I don't want to get into this whole debate, but because once you think you're being altruistic, you are no longer altruistic.
Your suggestion is that I mean, you're making an argument about the selfless acts not being selfless acts because they become selfish at that point.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're splitting the fucking hairs. I really do. I think that when you're talking about altruism, it has more to do with like subjectivity transcending singular points of subjectivity. So
that's fair. You and I have had this argument before.
No, that's why I had to pick at you a little bit. So, but definitely Star Trek does a good job of walking those various different lines. I mean, because it comes up over and over and over again, where the militarism versus the doing things for the sake of something that transcends the individual is out there, and at least it's something that they're sort of like playing with. And whether or not they ever achieve it, of course, it's easier to achieve in your mind than it is in reality. But it is a good sort of like social exercise. The same, I mean, in Contact, the same thing comes up in that. Like I said earlier, you know, you got that tension where the James Wood character is the representation of militarism. One thing that happens, and I'm kind of irritated, but at the end of the film, so she has this experience. Like they let the machine and they drop the ball and she goes down through it, and it literally takes like 34 seconds for the ball to hit the trampoline type thing that's sitting at the bottom of it. But so they have her do, at the end of the film, she's in front of Congress and there are all these people asking her about what happened, and James Wood's like, this is something that happened to your head, it's a self-reinforcing delusion, you know, Occam's razor, you know, what you're suggesting is like so far outside the norm of what would be the simplest explanation, because the simplest explanation tends to be the right one. And of course, like there's that, like the love interest that goes on between she and Matthew McConaughey, yeah. And like she takes a hard stand for science all the time, and he's like, how can you take a hard stance for science without accepting, and this is an argument that you've made a ton of times to Aaron and in other spaces, and I totally agree with you on this, where science is not an act purely of data. It is also an act of faith in certain moments, that you believe in what it is that you're doing, that you trust in what you know based on what you know, because what you're going to know tomorrow is going to be different than what you know today. So, but you have to accept that that you have an incomplete, you do not have a complete information account of what it is that's happening. Therefore, you're operating. So, like at the very end, when she says, when they're like, he's like, James Wood is like, you would be acting with the same, incredulity that we would if you were in our places and you didn't go through this experience. And then he's like, why don't you just withdraw your testimony? She says, I can't, because everything that happened to me, I believe was real, And basically she's accepting the argument that Palmer, McConaughey's character, had made throughout the entire thing. But I think that what they're suggesting in that moment is that that's the only way that we can get away from that sort of militaristic sort of like disposition. Like, it's healthy to be skeptical again. Like, you should put yourself in a position to where you are capable of protecting yourself, or at least if somebody tries to manipulate something, you can fuck them up. But you do have to have a measure of faith when you're going through these acts. Otherwise, what the fuck are you doing it for in the first place?
Well, and the simplest explanation thing, should be there. But I think that they have to accept the fact, again, that that's the simplest explanation based on the facts that we have right now. Mm-hmm. It's not the simplest explanation, period.
It's kind of like what you were saying about what is it that makes a person not a specialist, but qualified to make a determination in like a specialist.
Right. What makes them an authority?
An authority. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
I mean, and it's fine. You can give your fucking testimony, but that testimony should be based on stuff you actually know, not things you've heard from someone else. Mm-hmm. Whether it's aliens or fucking ghosts or whatever. I mean, people say they see fucking ghosts all the time too, and talk about demons and poltergeists and whatever. You don't see them testifying in front of Congress saying that we need more military money so that we can fight fucking ghosts or
unless it's those two guys.
Possessions.
Unless that's two guys from Supernatural, right?
Right.
Dean and the Winchester brothers.
So it's just, it's one of those things that people, like, I, again, accept that aliens could and probably do exist. What I don't accept is Congress saying, you know what, this guy is right. We do need to write a bigger check for military development because there's a chance that they're going to attack. There's also a chance that they could come here and bring us something to fucking clean up all the water that we fucked up from day one.
Or a super energy source that allows us to not be destroying everything that we...
Right. Yeah. I mean, those are just as viable possibilities as them coming to fuck us up. Whatever.
No, but it's important because, like, what's central to that is... So in the movie Arrival, right, which is another one where you have this pure science versus militaristic disposition. Like, it's Denis Villeneuve is the director. I love this guy. I think this is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, I can't wait for Dune to come out.
Yeah, he's the one that's doing the new Dunes. So yeah, I think it's November. End of November, that's coming out. Definitely gonna
October.
Have to watch. Is it October? Either way, the sooner the better.
Yeah.
I'm excited for it. So
unless they changed it again,
but in the movie Arrival, they do all this really fucked up time horizon things where the aliens come down. There's 12 ships. They're all over the they're all over the earth. There's 2 in Russia. There's 1 in Sudan. There's 1 in Pakistan. There's 1 in China. There's 1 in the U.S. They're all over the place. Some in Europe. There's 12 of them. Australia. Blah 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 blah. There's 2 aliens on each ship. When the main character Amy, whatever her name is, goes up to they have her because she's a language expert, and then Jeremy Renner is a math science expert, and what the main character figures out is that we have to be able to start communicating with them. So she kind of starts to show them some things about our language and how that connects to our subjectivity, and through that, the 2 aliens, which they call Abbott and Costello, because the way that they write their names, we don't have any framework for saying. So let me go back for just a second. She finds that common ground where they're communicating with one another, but that's got to be kind of a swap. So she starts to kind of understand what their language is, and they start to kind of understand what our language is. But there's this whole thing in their interactions where, by learning their language, it starts to affect the way that she perceives time. So she starts to get bound up in their concept of subjectivity. And our subjectivity is rooted in this space where we're all separate individuals. We don't have a way of even thinking about, every time you interact with a new individual, you have to do all these things to build trust, right? Everything, otherwise this person's just opposite to you. You don't know who they are, you don't know what they do, you don't know what their assumptions are, and they could take advantage of you. But in that movie, by looking at the world through their framework of understanding things, she becomes enmeshed in their subjectivity to where she actually starts to stretch out her own subjectivity to start touching base with all these other people. And one of the big antagonists in it is the Chinese military guy, and she does this thing towards the end of the film where she reaches out to him through a private number, and she quotes to him his wife's dying words, which is a comment about like how war just is an endless thing that never takes you down a good path. And to say that to the general of the Chinese military is kind of a crazy thing to say, but it opens up this space where everything isn't rooted in this absolute degree of cynicism, but the way that we construct knowledge, the way that we interact with one another right now, where everybody's like hostile, towards the other because trust is not there. Like, it just...
I understand what you're saying, and I don't know. I mean, dude, I'm a fucking cynic. There is no doubt. But I think within that cynicism, I see a chance to, try to understand what people are thinking or why they do what it is that they do. I don't think most people have that thought, no matter how phony they are with, being outgoing and smiling and shaking hands and whatever. Everything that they do is based on small talk, and it's also based on, well, that guy's black. I'm not going to tell him anything because I'm scared of him, because the news says I'm supposed to be scared of black people. I don't like those people because they're Mexican, and I know that they're trying to invade the United States and take all of our jobs, so I'm not going to talk to him. So all of this shit that they do is just completely phony unless you catch them when they're off guard, like the lady that clutches her purse because she sees, whatever color they are, youth coming toward her, and she's afraid that they're going to grab her purse. They don't want your fucking purse, lady. Why would you assume that that's what they're going to automatically do? I mean, people are fucking retarded. Sorry, I'm not going to go off on it, but I get what you're saying. Like, that we have to understand what it is that someone else has to say, especially if they're from somewhere else and may have more knowledge than we do.
There's a concept that comes out at the end where, dude, it is, and like, I know some people that when it comes to the movie, they thought it was just kind of like a trite, like playing with the narrative the way that it comes out, because Amy Adams keeps remembering these things in the future. So like in Fringe, they do this thing one time where they're talking about how the observers see time versus the way that we see time. And so like the way that we see, there's a tube that's filled with water, right? And we see it in segments, but the observers are capable of seeing the whole thing at the same time, right? So Amy Adams, through the interaction with this language, starts to do what the observers do. She remembers things that she doesn't even know. She's remembering things from the future. And there's this space where her daughter, when she's about 10 years old, asks her a question. She's like, what do you call it when two sides come out of a negotiation happy? And Amy Adams says this, a compromise. She's like, no, it's not a compromise. It's something more. And she finally gets around to where she says it's a non-zero sum game, right? So like the point of like getting to that, and that's what her daughter was trying to get her to remember. And that's what puts her back to where she actually gets to the space, knowing that she needs to reach out to the Chinese general. She calls him with a phone number that he gives her in the future. She tells him his wife's dying words, and she's reaching out into the future for this to happen. But that concept of the non-zero sum game, it takes things out of this quantifiable space where everything is a well, if I get 7, then you get 3, or if I get 142, then you only get 58 or something like that. Whatever the quantifiable disposition is, where there's a concrete winner and a concrete loser, as opposed to like understanding that we're all sort of part of the social fabric that creates the space of possibilities and allows us to meditate on what it is that's possible in a given space outside the context of a straight military, or like the prisoner's dilemma, or any space where there have to be winners or losers, right? I mean, like, I don't know. I fucking love that movie, though. I think it was fucking awesome. And it definitely put the tension between people that look forward or have a way of looking forward differently. And it's not this straight. The one thing I really liked about it is it's not this straight. Part of the reason why I don't like Star Trek as much as I used to is because Star Trek is rooted in that liberal disposition. Like, I think if you want to imagine something, it has to have a different temporal rhythm to it, where it's not, because we don't really know what the trajectories are. We don't really know what the vectors are. We don't know how to fucking get where it is that we're going. We don't know what new is. New is a very difficult concept to fucking.
Well, most of us don't know where we've been.
Well, that's probably a fact too. I don't even know if I know where we've been. I know how it was framed for me. I know how I go back over it, trying to look at how it's been bastardized. But that in its own right is like a brutally infinite fucking process.
Yeah. But at least you have key parts of it, whatever those may or may not be. I mean, fuck, up until 10 years ago, they had buried Sand Creek, the Sand Creek Massacre. There was nothing about it. And now there's a fucking museum, which I think is both scary and hysterical in the same breath. Yeah, so I'm not even real sure where to go. Like, the time you were talking about The Arrival, I kept thinking of this fucking line. So Jennifer Connelly and Keanu Reeves are talking, and
the day the earth stood still.
Yeah, and she says, "Are you here to hurt us? Are you?"
She's smoking hot.
I love Jennifer Connelly, but she's talking to Keanu Reeves, and she says something along the lines of, "Are you here to hurt us? Or are you a friend?" And he says, "I'm a friend of the earth." And so she just automatically assumes that means the earth and all of the people. But he's here to take kind of it's got a fucking stupid religious tone to it because he's taken 2 of every animal and whatever. Because we have fucked up the earth so bad that we're going to die. So he's a friend of the earth, and he's taking everybody off, and he's going to kill everyone with this fucking weird nanotechnology. But
was he an alien?
He's a friend of the earth. Yeah. So that, I mean, again, it shows kind of our fucking arrogance of the thing, like that we understand when she says, "Are you here to hurt us?" And he says, "No, I'm a friend of the earth," because he didn't want to say, "Well, yeah, I'm gonna fucking kill all of you." But she just automatically, she's like, "Oh, a friend of the earth. Well, I'm part of the earth, so he must not be here to hurt me."
She asked the wrong question.
Right. Yeah. So, obviously, there's a lot that could be said about any one of these movies. I mean,
did you ever see The Knowing or Knowing?
Probably, but I don't know. The name sounds familiar, but I can't remember it.
Nicolas Cage.
Oh, no, I didn't watch that. That's the 3-second one, right?
What's the 3-second one?
Where he can remember 3 seconds into the future or some shit?
No, this is where, so like this kid starts writing all these numbers down, and it predicts future events, and Nicolas Cage figures out, like what's going on, and it turns out that his son and this lady's daughter are going to be saved by angels, but the angels are really like U.F.O, like beings from another planet, and they take them and take them to the other planet to repopulate it. But it's kind of a mind fuck when you watch it, but it's the same kind of thing. Like in the back of Nicolas Cage's head, he thinks that he's going to find a way to beat the code and live with his son. And of course his dad is a preacher and he's a physicist, so like there's that tension, and he ends up going with his dad when the act of destroying the earth comes, and they get the fucking kids off, and they're the only ones that end up surviving. But angels as fucking UFOs is another goofy ass kind of.
Some weirdo, like I remember we were at this party. I remember Trisha Height was there. Anyway, I was like fucking 19, 20 years old, and I'm getting hammered, and we started talking about UFOs, I think, and some weirdo goes, "You're going to be real fucking surprised when Jesus Christ flies in on a UFO."
Jesus came riding up on a quasar.
And that kind of stuck in my head because it was just such a weird fucking comment. But that kind of goes, like, was it, I think it was the second Matrix, where they were talking about any weird shit that happened, whether it was vampires, werewolves, or angels, or any of this stuff.
From a previous iteration of the Matrix.
It was something that they couldn't get rid of. It was basically a bug in the system. So, yeah, maybe all of this shit, all of these weirdo religious nut jobs that see this shit, maybe it is angels. Maybe it is aliens and they call them angels. I don't fucking know. I definitely don't have the answers.
Just as a funny side note on that, the previous iterations of the, because the Merovingian, you know what the Merovingians were? They talked about it in the Da Vinci Code, but it was the family that they escaped from with Jesus and Mary Magdalene's child, and they went to France, and the Merovingian was that was the family's blood descendants from Jesus, suggesting that he had a kid. And to call that first guy the Merovingian in relation to Neo, the Merovingian would have been one of like the first or second generation iterations of, he would have been the what's it called, the
patriarch,
the anomaly, he would have been the pre-Neo, like from a different iteration. He's just like the werewolves and not the werewolves, the vampires and all that shit. But he was Neo in a previous iteration. That was the suggestion, clearly.
Okay.
You remember, like she said, I want to kiss him, and she says, "Oh, I felt that once before." That was her saying that she was Trinity and he was Neo in a previous iteration of the Matrix.
Okay. I don't know, dude. I never read all the weird religious shit into the Matrix that everybody, like every fucking Catholic I know, loved that fucking movie.
Really?
Yeah. It was, but they read all kinds of shit into it and talked about, Jesus coming to save us. And
well, I don't take it to that level. I just know that I know that little mythology about the Merovingians in relation, and the fact that they called him that was not a mistake. That's all I'm saying. So they did that on purpose.
Well, I'm sure they do pretty much everything on purpose.
Yeah, they're crazy.
They like to write things that make people think. Okay, so I don't know. We went off on a little bit of a tangent there.
You? Me? Tangent?
It's kind of a strange occurrence when that happens. So we kind of talked about the bugs thing. I wanted to talk about, I don't know. There's a couple, there's a few that make me laugh because they're so fucking stupid that they make me laugh, and I probably shouldn't be laughing. There's a couple that they've made that were supposed to be fucking funny. The one, I just watched it again the other night, called The Watch. I think it came out in 2010. It had the guy from the IT crowd, the black guy from the IT crowd was in it, and I never can remember his name. Vince Vaughn was in it, and Ben Stiller.
I know nothing about this movie.
Well, they started a neighborhood watch because this guy got murdered at the Costco, and they started a neighborhood watch. Well, it turned out that they were fighting against aliens while they were in the neighborhood watch, and it was the aliens that had killed the security guard. That was a funny fucking movie, and it was supposed to be funny. Mars Attacks was funny, and it was supposed to be funny, and they stacked Mars Attacks with fucking
there were a lot of people
just
in that film.
shitloads of people. Nicholson was in it, Michael J. Fox was in it, Annette Bening was in it, Jim Brown was in it. So it had to be good if Jim Brown was in it.
Sarah Jessica Parker.
Yeah. So it was full of stuff, and that was one that was supposed to be funny. Battleship was not supposed to be funny. And why the fuck, I guess Transformers was such a success, they decided that they could make other toys into movies. But Battleship was like a board game.
You sunk my battleship.
Right. But they were fighting aliens in Battleship. There was one called Battle Los Angeles that was so fucking bad it made me laugh.
Yeah, I watched half of it. I couldn't get through it.
Cowboys versus Aliens.
No, not in this lifetime.
Horrible fucking movie, dude. So stupid it made me laugh. Now, the ones that I liked that were supposed to be funny, well, besides The Watch and Mars Attacks, were Evolution. That was an Ivan Reitman movie.
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
And I don't even know if we can technically consider it, because basically a meteor hit and it had these cells on it, and the cells started to evolve once they hit our atmosphere, and they grew into big nasty fucking aliens that were going to kill us all.
I think that qualifies.
But David Duchovny, he's got 2 first names, actually 3. It's Sean William Scott, I think, was in it. Orlando something or other. He was on 7-Up commercials.
Well, I'll definitely know who that is.
Julianne Moore, Dan Aykroyd, there were a whole bunch of people in that one too, and Reitman did it, so it was funny, and it was supposed to be funny. But as they evolved, they'd end up getting wings and flying, and they'd have to fight off that alien, and then it was just kind of funny. And I don't know. If you haven't seen Evolution, you probably should check it out if you like Reitman.
Oh, it's got Ethan Suplee in it, the dude from American History X.
Well, that's the guy that I was saying from Remember the Titans.
Yeah, I've not seen that either.
And
so
I
didn't
think
make that connection.
I think he played Michael Myers in one of the Halloweens.
Really?
I'm not positive, but he's a big dude, so he could probably get away with it.
He was a big dude, to be sure.
Is he dead?
Well, it looks like he lost a bunch of weight. That's why I said that.
Oh, okay. But the other one is a Lorne Michaels production, so it's a Saturday Night Live thing, and it's the Coneheads. I can watch that fucking movie over and over and over again.
No, I watched it once, and I don't even remember anything about it because of how bad it was.
And as an added bonus, I think one of my favorite Paul Simon songs ever is in it, Kodachrome.
I'm not going to watch a movie just so I can see Kodachrome.
Okay, well, whatever.
So did they like drive you intellectually? Did they really get you thinking about things?
No, dude, it was a fucking comedy.
Some comedies can make a person think.
Well, again, it was, I mean, the Air Force wasn't after these guys. It was the fucking INS because they were here and they bought illegal papers. So he was trying to bust them for working here. And when the fucking alien spacecraft came to grab him, he jumped up on there and was saying, "No, you're not getting away from me." So they ended up taking him to the other planet, him and David Spade. David Spade was in it too. Well, the whole fucking Saturday Night Live crew was in it. David Spade was there. What's his name? Fucking Happy Gilmore. And Adam Sandler was in it.
Yeah. He'd have been young then too, huh?
He was definitely younger. Tim, what's his name? The one who played Ladies Man. But it was all mostly Saturday Night Live guys. Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd did it because they did the Coneheads back when it was still Saturday Night Live. It was a good flick. Chris Farley was in it.
Did he do some slapstick? I mean, that's his whole thing.
Not really. But he started dating the daughter.
The Conehead daughter?
And some stupid shit happened. Like, they went to Subway. I don't know why Subway likes to fucking advertise in Saturday Night Live movies, but they do.
They probably have a Saturday Night Live contract.
Maybe. I don't know. Lorne Michaels might know somebody at Subway. But the whole Conehead family eats lots and lots of everything. Anything a human would do, they do it exponentially greater. So he takes her out for lunch, and they're at Subway, and she fucking pounds this fucking sandwich, like swallows it whole almost. And he's like, "I've never seen anybody except my mom take a sandwich like that." And she's like, "Oh," and burps. She said, "Are you going to eat that?" And then Dan Aykroyd rips his car open and says, "I don't ever want to see you again, or I will put sufficient force on your blunt skulls so that you cease to live," or some shit. And he's like, "Okay, thank you." And he just closed the fucking car up. It's just stupid, funny shit. But no thought at all. I don't think it made me think, I wonder about the INS. The guy that did the INS stuff, he was kind of crazy, though. He's like, "So when the Mexicans get caught here, let's put a collar on them, and we'll bury a wire all along the border so that when they come back over," and he turns this thing on and it lights this little plastic thing on fire. So I guess it does make you think about diplomatic relations between us and Mexico to some degree.
That is what we call a stretch.
Yes, it was. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, dude. I'll talk about whatever you want to talk about.
No, I'm just looking at my list. You brought up The Abyss. I mean, that was one that was definitely sort of like the liberal disposition, but it was cool because it wasn't something coming from outside. It was something that it had come from outside at some point, but it had been underwater for a long time. That was kind of an odd fucking twist on a science fiction movie where you're dealing with, like, their spaceship was, landed underwater for forever.
Well, and they weren't trying to hurt us.
No, definitely
and
not.
In fact, they fucking rescued all of those people,
Mm-hmm.
and took them up to the top when whatever their water substation started to flood.
It got cut off from what was above them. There was a huge hurricane. And then that dipshit was having some underwater problems. So he sent the nuclear bomb down. Virgil goes down to get the who is Ed Harris, I guess played that person. Goes down there to defuse the bomb, and he's dying. And one of the two of the aliens come and snag him, get him down there, get him some air, and then come up and bring the underwater mining thing, whatever the fuck it was.
Yeah, I can't remember why they were down there.
They were mining. It was some sort of an underwater oil rig or something like that. So definitely not altruistic in that way. So
no, but nevertheless, the aliens still saved them. But is that the liberal disposition that you're talking about, where they save them instead of
everything's good, everything's bad? I mean, good. This is just positivity, and if we hold hands together and sing Kumbaya, I mean, yeah. But it was an okay movie. It wasn't a horrible movie. Oblivion. Now that was a fucking weird fucking movie. They totally wrecked the human race, but we didn't have a shot. Did you ever see that one?
I'm trying to think. Who was in it?
Tom Cruise and some redheaded chick.
No, I'm not a Tom Cruise guy.
Dude, he does some really good science fiction. You watched Edge of Tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I finally ended up watching it when they changed the name, because when they first named it, it was called Live, Die, Repeat, which is fucking stupid. Yeah, I ended up watching that, but that was just because you and Janae kept hounding me about it.
Janae was hounding you about it too. So in Oblivion, this like big ass triangle thing comes, and it's like circling the Earth. So they send like a space shuttle type thing up to meet with it. It won't respond. So the character Victoria and Jack is Tom Cruise. They get pulled in, like it has some tractor beam thing, and it pulls them in, and they eject because all the other people that are inside of the spaceship are hibernating. So they eject them. They get taken inside of the spaceship, which is the Tet, and the Tet basically goes and fucking destroys everybody else that's on Earth, and they didn't know about them kicking out those other astronauts, so they're just rotating around the Earth for a long time, and they clone those two individuals, and they put them in all these different places, Sector 84, Sector 83, Sector 163, all over the globe. And I
have seen Oblivion. That's the fucking
Morgan Freeman's in it.
Yeah, they have the
Jamie Lannister's in it.
Weird floating thing that's like his house, right?
What? Yeah. They're up there, and they go down, and if so, whatever.
And there was some weird time thing, right?
Well, time got fucked up in their heads because they're, like I said, they're bred. They're like test tube babies, and when they get to a certain age, they send them down there and replace them with the old ones, and the consciousness inside the Tet took for granted the fact that they still maintained some measure of memory. So one of the individuals that was shot out of that spaceship that had been circling around the Earth for all that time period was Tom Cruise's Jack's fiance. And he keeps having dreams about her. He's like, who's this fucking person that I keep having dreams about? And then finally, it gets stuck in the atmosphere and it comes down. So this one of the 732 Jacks that are living around the Earth, helping to maintain the, they're taking water from the ocean. That's like what the long-term goal is of this Tet thing. And he goes down and he's and immediately the things that had destroyed everybody on Earth, they go and they start destroying all the people that are in those pods, but he finds this person that he's been having dreams about and he saves her, right? And at some point he gets stuck in this space where these things that he thinks are the aliens that destroyed the Earth, who are really just the humans that have survived, which is very, very, very few. They take him down and tell him basically, you're a clone. You know, you're just over and over and over again.
Those are the ones on like the speeder bikes or whatever, right?
There is a speeder bike thing that's only what they steal from Jack, because those are part of the technology that Jack has, that the Tet has given them to. But I mean, that one is like, while I will argue that Arrival, the way that they flip it around, that isn't just a narrative thing. The Oblivion one was just kind of a dorky narrative thing, and him and Morgan Freeman go up and make a nuclear missile go off in there to destroy the Tet so that they can all go on.
Yeah,
down on the Earth.
I remember seeing that vaguely, now that you sort of described it.
But that's like an alien when we were so overwhelmed we never had a shot in the first place. So,
well, honestly, that's what I think. If these fucking races, people from other planets, whatever, if they can fly here in like less time than it takes us to get to Mars, I'm pretty sure that they can just fuck us up as much as they want to and never even admit to being here. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Air Force Defense can fucking catch them on radar or sonar or whatever.
Well, I mean, if anything is true about the stuff that we talked about, I mean, if any of that stuff really is alien, like the Tic Tac thing, the way that those things can move, the way that they can go through water, you know, we'd have no shot against anything like that. It better be something more like, they're not going to engage us until we get to a certain development with regards to our technology, and once we get to that point, they might come and try to help us to not fucking kill ourselves. I mean, I have to hope that it's positive, you know, because I totally think you're right. Like, we're not even thinking on, because honestly, like, we think about like travel like that as if you're going from spot A to spot B in a straight line. I mean, when you're talking about stars that you're seeing what they're, so they say they're 4 light years away, right? It's off by 4. You're seeing where it was at 4 years ago, right? I mean, so there are some serious concrete problems with the way that we approach the construction of the universe, where if there are things like multiple dimensions, there was this one stupid movie that I was watching earlier today, and it was called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. It was a documentary, and where did I put my little notes on that? What they were showing was like, it's almost like if you imagine like what we were looking at something in 2D, like what would that look like to us, and what would we look like to that? So we might be seeing something that's operating on, you know, the 18th dimension or whatever, so it blips in and out really quick, but we don't have any way of really engaging that because we don't fucking understand what the fourth fucking dimension is, or the fifth dimension, or again, like even as I talk about it, I'm talking about it in a linear way, and I don't think if you start to grasp these things that you're going to think about it in a linear way. You know, there's something that we have no shot against anybody that can manipulate space and time on that level. We would be fucking. I really, really hope that they would be here not to destroy us, because they could whoop our asses in, 3 seconds flat.
If that long. And maybe they don't even have to be here. I mean, maybe they can just fucking launch a fucking ray from wherever they are and wipe us out and then come and fucking take our water and whatever else.
Whatever it would be that they would have an interest in. Or if it was like Jupiter Ascending, where they just harvest our energy so that they can live forever.
And maybe they have no interest in us at all, because we're just a bunch of fucking assholes.
That's what they probably just come here like we're like this is Earth, Yellowstone National Park. Go look and see what the stupid fucking beings that live down there do.
Yeah.
Look at how they fucking kill each other. Look at how they create these fucking things that look like little toys in the ground and explode.
It's like going to a zoo.
I mean it's got to be, because it makes more sense than trying to get it. We can't even learn from each other, much less something else. We're on the defensive in that space. Like, it's funny that it's almost comically like ironic that our bullshit way of doing democracy has maintained itself without imploding on itself this long. I mean, it's definitely had a few moments where it almost totally imploded, but I bet you those aliens would be laughing their asses off at us. Like Seinfeld, look at those guys. They're following those four-legged things and picking their poop up off the ground. What kind of fucking idiot does that?
Dogs?
Yeah, that's what Seinfeld was like. Like if an alien came and watched us do that.
Yeah. We definitely do some stupid shit. I don't know. I covered most of my movies. I mean, I left a couple of them out, which I should have talked about The Faculty, because it was kind of in that same category of Puppet Masters and Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
What's The Faculty?
The Faculty, Jon Stewart was in it. Selma Hayek was in it. The kid, I don't know, he was in Green Street Hooligans. Anyway, so this kid finds this thing and he thinks that it's a new species, and his science teacher, Jon Stewart, is really excited about the whole thing. Well, they figure out when they get it wet that it comes alive, so they threw it in this tank of water. Well, these little bugs basically do the same thing as like the Puppet Masters do, except I'm not quite sure how they do it, because it never really showed it that I can remember. But they basically take over everybody's body, because these bugs have run out of water on their planet, and now they just cruise around from planet to planet trying to get moisture. And I don't know, that like it shows the one coach and it's raining outside and he's just looking up and he's got all this shit coming out of his face and out of his arms and everything because he's just trying to absorb that moisture. But it's, again, along the same lines where they just come here and take over everybody's body.
That would have made sense in that context.
Yeah.
Just as a side note, what's his name? The guy, Jon Stewart. His name is Professor Edward Furlong.
Yeah, I saw that when I was looking it up a couple of days ago, and I thought that was weird because Ed Furlong is the kid that played the Terminator.
Yeah,
or in the Terminator.
And American History X.
Yeah.
But why would, could you think of any reason why they would have made that reference to him?
I have no clue,
Yeah,
dude.
that's fucking weird. Maybe I have to look at the different names of people in that movie and see if there's not just a bunch of weird science fiction actors in there.
Yeah, no idea why they would have done that. But it's one of those that's kind of the shitty science fiction alien horror movie, and I don't even know if I would call it a cult classic, but it's not something that I would go out to watch. I watch it when it's on, but I watch lots of stupid shit when it's on.
You do. You are right about that.
Yeah. I am not ashamed to say it. Because I've watched a lot of stupid shit for a long time. If I talked about The Faculty, that pretty much clears my fucking list.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, we didn't talk about Alien Nation. And I only wrote that one down because you started talking about it yesterday.
I made a little reference to it earlier. So.
Yeah, the San Francisco thing. So I guess we did talk about it.
San Francisco. The only two that I have on there that we haven't covered is 2001, 2010, just because of the concept of the monolith being an alien. Like it's actually like a driver of history.
I never saw either of those movies.
Those are important films to watch. 2001, I mean, just because of the concept of the monolith comes when everything lines up, like planets, this and that. And so at the beginning of 2001, there's apes that are like standing around being apes. And this ape picks up a femur or something and hits it on the ground where there's a skull and smashes the skull. So he realizes the concept of a tool, right? So it's like the first. So he goes and kills one of the other apes, and there's a power relationship that develops out of that. So like that's like the beginning of time, according to Arthur C. Clarke, referencing Hegel and Marx or something like that. I don't know, but I only say that in terms of the fact that time existed through those social relations. But and the other thing is when you have an artificial intelligence or something close to that, and you give it conflicting, you tell it to do one thing and you tell it to do another thing, and those things are contradictory. It doesn't have the ability to think creatively, so it has to put one above another. So the computer starts killing everybody on the ship so that it can finish its...
You talking about HAL?
HAL, yes, I am. And then David Bowman goes off, and then he goes into the monolith, right? And he says it's full of stars. So, like, that's the last thing that they get from him in terms of a transmission. But, again, this is not a traditional way of thinking about aliens. It's not a traditional way of thinking about like an alien spaceship. It's just the monolith is just this thing that shows up in certain places at certain times when it's time for something different to occur, for you to have a leap, a huge mental, social, leap. It's cool, and I was actually talking to, what's the name of the Lazy
Jace.
Yeah, I was talking the guy that's there on Sundays, and he told me something that I didn't know, and I looked it up, and he's right. Arthur C. Clarke had not finished 2001. He finished 2001. Stanley Kubrick and him were actually talking back and forth with regards to ideas. So they finished the movie and the book at the same time, which is different than a movie being based off of a book. There's literally like this sort of dialogical process going on between the two of them, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And the only other one besides 2001, 2010 is Alien Nation. But that's where you have, like, we're in comparable power positions. Like, they can kill us, we can kill them. It's like a new Cold War that exists out in space.
Well, I think a lot of them, there's so many levels to all of these movies, because I think just on the face of all of it is, or with Alien Nation
I didn't mean it. I meant Enemy
specifically.
Mine. I was thinking about Enemy Mine. I'm sorry. I said the wrong thing. No, but go ahead.
Well, no, but even Enemy Mine, because those guys fucking hated each other and then ended up having this weird crossbreed baby.
Because he was impregnated when he got there, yeah. And He did not make him pregnant. He became pregnant on his own.
Okay. That's fine. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it, so I'm not going to argue one way or the other.
I watched it about a year and a half ago. My sister put it on a thing for us, and I watched it 2 or 3 times when I was a kid. But it was so fucking weird, and it was so fucking long. It was kind of hard for me to negotiate back then.
Well, so it wasn't, a weird alien crossbreed baby then. It was just a baby. But he ended up taking care of the baby. But what I was going to say is that I think all of these movies, on some level, talk about racism and just dealing with people that we don't know.
Yeah, something different. Yes. The other sort of, yeah.
Whether or not we're shooting at them or not.
Uh-huh.
With the bug thing, maybe that's different. I don't know. But like you said with District 9, it was talking about apartheid.
Well, it depends on how they put it in those. Some of them definitely are direct comparisons to our current or previous to our human existence.
Well, I think Alien Nation was that way. I think Enemy Mine was that way. I mean, because those guys fucking hated each other, but it wasn't necessarily racism. It was because, they were on different planets and they always hated each other because they didn't know what the fuck the other one did. And, the one believed the propaganda that the one was saying and the other believed the propaganda that their people were saying. And so they hated each other and fought constantly.
I thought of it as like the Soviets in the U.S. ultimately, because it was full civilizations, like you just said. Like they did not know anything about, except for in some caricatured sort of.
Yeah, just shit that people feed you through the media and whatever.
But they were forced to survive together. So, and like you said, he ends up raising his kid, and then he goes back and he ends up becoming like the first like real diplomat. Like through what happens with him raising that kid. Because they save each other, and he's, and they really save each other.
Well, he ended up getting in a fight too when Dennis Quaid came back because they were making fun of the kid or something, right?
No,
and he had to punch somebody.
There were some people that were on the planet they had like a mining operation, so they stole the kid to use him, and they were using them as labor. They had stolen other kids like him and it just so happens to be that they were on that planet. So they stole the kid, and then he went and saved him from there and saved the other kids from there. And he finally, I think if I remember correctly, because of those miners, when he finally removed them from that spot, he had the ability to get out of there finally to save them, because they were stranded otherwise. They didn't have both of their fucking spaceships were destroyed. So he needed some other means to get off the planet, and it seemed like through the miners he finally created that space. But it is weird because it was like 1983, 1984 when it was made, and we were so enmeshed in as children during that time period, like
adults too.
Yeah, but I just mean with us because we were not in an age to have any sort of critical disposition. When I was 7, you were 10. I mean. Like Red Dawn came out the same year, so we're like looking at it through the lens of the Soviets are going to come and invade. There's going to be nuclear bombs, blah, 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 just fear, and hatred.
Now it's a different type of fear and hatred.
Yeah, at some point, the fear and hatred of the United States, that chicken's going to come to roost. Yeah, you guys, you're going to love that comment, aren't you? That'll be one for your books.
Well, if they don't know that people fucking fear and hate us, then they probably should pull their head out of their ass. Because I think even if, like when I used to go to Romania all the time, those guys, the ones that, and strangely, like people outside of the U.S. pay attention to global politics much more
Way
than
more.
The United
when I
States
lived in Canada,
does.
I was bitch slapped over that point.
But they would always talk about the U.S. and there was fear there, but it wasn't fear that we were going to attack Romania. It was more fear like we were going to attack the wrong country or the wrong organization, and they never gave names. I mean, None of them were thrilled that Donald Trump was our president. But just little things like that. So even if they don't necessarily hate us or fear that we're going to attack them directly, they understand that our stupidity could cause their downfall regardless.
That seems like pretty reasonable. I remember when I was in China in 2016, like in most of the places I was at, nobody spoke English because the further west you go, like the less people spoke. But I remember a few times people saying, "What in the fucking world is going on in your country right now?" Like the grips of reality were falling out of our hands, and there would be potentially horrible consequences for everybody at that point in time, which, given what you just said about the Romanians, was a pretty reasonable.
Well, the Brits were kind of the same way. Again, not afraid that we were going to attack them, but afraid because we do a lot of fucking stupid shit that impacts a lot of people, even if you're just talking about impacts the people of one hemisphere. It's a lot of fucking people. And so it was just, again, the Brits, they fucking hated Trump and wondered how the fuck he could ever get elected.
Which is weird, because Boris Johnson was aligned with that same sort, just to an extent. He was aligned with some of Trump's positions.
Yeah, but when you're talking to the people,
that's
versus
different. That's different. Okay.
Because I didn't talk to anybody in Parliament or the Prime Minister or anybody.
There's Big Ben. There's Parliament. Look, kids, Big Ben, Parliament.
So I don't know. All right, we went off topic again. Well, kind of, not really. But we're over an hour. We're coming up on an hour 15 again. Do you want to talk about some more shit, or should we wrap it up? Do you know what next episode is going to be?
I don't know. We talked about a few things, but I don't know. What do you? You brought up two things.
I have no idea, dude. I bring up things all the time, and usually you say, I don't know, I got to think about it.
Well, maybe we'll just surprise them. We'll talk about it.
Okay, next episode is going to be a surprise. And I'm sure that you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Or not so pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, depending on your outlook.
6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Okay, so we're going to wrap this thing up. You can reach us via email at shortbusdebateclub@yahoo.com.
720-334-ROLL.
That is the phone number. So give us a call, shoot us an email. Thanks for listening.
Adios.